Alright everyone, welcome back to the channel for another Bitcoin update. So in today's episode, we're going to be looking at potential bottoming ranges based on both the fixed range volume price and the volume profile for the visible range, which I'm sure most people know as the VPVR. Additionally, we're also going to be talking about in the lower term timeframes what level we would need to hold in the immediate short term to prevent a cascade. And if you are a seasoned veteran of my channel, you do probably know that I am expecting a cascade to happen. So what I'll really be saying is, hey, if we break beneath this level, we're going to be magnetized to this level. So with that being said, let's jump right into today's video. Now, before we do jump into the volume profiles for this bull run, I just want to show you how effective this tool can be using the fixed ranges from the previous market structure. So it does not matter if you do draw from the all-time low in this bear market down at $165, or it doesn't matter if you draw from one of the most brutal corrections down here. This doesn't look too brutal because we are in a logarithmic growth curve scale, but bear in mind this crashed from about $800 all the way down to about $500. So this was one of the more brutal swings to the downside. Once again, it doesn't matter. We are presented with this huge box of support over on the VPVR. And yes, I mean, if you look at this, you can really see, you know, anything before that, you know, once you lost this level here, once you lost 4,500, there was no support in this range, which is why we completely cascaded down to the next area of support. Now, what you can see is we basically bottomed just above this volume profile. So once again, a very simple yet a very powerful indicator. If we do clear this one up, I'll keep this one on the chart actually. Now let's move over to the VPVR first and look at the volume profile for the visible range in the short term. Now, when we do look at basically this run to the upside from your wave one on Elliott wave theory, which is round about this $12,000 to $13,000 mark, you will notice we really don't have a lot of clusters of support. And this makes sense because when we do look at the market structure, you know, a lot of people saying this was a bull market. I would agree, disagree, but the fact of the matter is we were the same price for 532 days. We were more or less just crabbing up, down, up, down, up, down in the same range, which is why we created such a large volume profile around these levels. And subsequently, you know, what happened once you dropped below, in my opinion, the cluster absolutely started diminishing after you dropped below this level. And this also lines up with all the floors down here in terms of the price wicks. Now, what you can see is you lost this VPVR zone. There was no volume traded within this region, which also makes sense because as you can see, this was the all-time high. We really didn't spend too much time here. We broke down, we weren't at this level for years, and as you did break above it, you just had a straight line to the upside. So you basically missed out from the all-time high up until this huge cluster of the VPVR up here. Let me mark this a certain color so you can recognize that this is the range I'm talking about. Let's mark it in red. You can see there was no volume traded within this region, and subsequently it doesn't matter whether we're looking at the fixed volume profiles or the volume profiles for the visible range. There was no data associated with this level down here. Now, in the short term, we do actually have a very large cluster right here. Let me mark it from 18,400, and I'll mark it as green right now because we are technically just above this massive cluster between the ranges of where we are literally at right now, 19,500, which also lines up with Bitcoin's previous all-time high, down here to 18,450. The only reason there's a decent amount of volume traded over here is because you can basically see we had a straight line up, but we actually stopped for about 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we blasted off on the 5th week. And if we do look back at the trend over here, so if I mark from the bottom of this cluster over here, you did spend, you know, bear in mind this is 2 weeks worth of volume, but as you can imagine, we probably didn't spend more than a week here. We probably blasted up towards the end of the week and then headed back down. It's really not important nonetheless. But what I am trying to show you is at this moment in time, this is the cluster that we have in the short term over on the VPVR. Now, if we do break below Bitcoin's previous all-time high, in my opinion, we're going to be heavily magnetized to the downside. Now, you can argue previous all-time high up at the wick here, 19,600, and then you've got Bitcoin's all-time high from the candle body close, which is at basically 19,200. That is the level where I really think you would not want to see a break below. I personally am predicting a break beneath there. I think we're going to go to lower regions, which I will talk about in a second. But just to look at purely what the volume profile for the visible range says, 18,500 is really the floor. There is not a lot of data traded within this range, and also you can see over here the fixed range is in agreement. This is saying, hey, if you drop below, this one's a little bit lower. This one's actually at, you've got a cluster between 18,700 and 17,000, but I would really like to emphasize, you know, these are not large clusters. You know, these are large clusters, these are large clusters. This is a semi-large cluster, this is a semi-large cluster, but beneath there is really no volume traded. There are no volume profiles beneath that range. You know, there are, but they are very, very weak. So right off the back, in the short term, if you do see a massive cascade below 18,500, I think we're going to take the floorboard out. Now, what's one other way to make this slightly more accurate? Well, what we can actually do is go over to the fixed range, and we can change the row size. So let's double this up. This is currently at 37. Let's increase this to 70 so we can get a lot more approximate targets. Now, let's see when we do head down, or rather when we do expand this so we've got more volume profiles per candle. Let's see if this is an agreement. And as you can see, when you do increase the row size, what you will notice is this is much more in agreement now, and this pretty much only wasn't in agreement before, because, you know, the lower the row size, then the less accurate it's going to be. Well, I say that, but over here, once again, the lower the row size, it's going to be a little bit difficult to see whereabouts we should be moving to. But once again, you increase the row size, and it seems like the VPVR, based on the wave 1 of the Elliott wave theory, all the way up to round about 14,000, all the way back down and all the way back up. This is in high agreement. VPVR and fixed volume range is in agreement. So once again, if you do take out the floorboards, technically VPVR is saying 18,500 you cascade. The volume profile is saying, hey, a little bit more to the downside over on 18,000. So 18,000 might be a little bit more conservative than the volume profile for the visible range, which has been out, or we have plotted for a less substantial period in time. So let's say 18,500 to 18,000. If you fall beneath that level, where is the next major cluster to the downside? And for this, I want to forget about the VPVR for the volume profile for the visible range, and I want to look at the fixed volume profile. So let's look and see, since the bear market low all the way up to the current high, let's see. So what you will actually notice is the first major cluster is coming in at 12,570. So if we mark, let's mark it with a rectangle. You've got a massive cluster right here, and if we do drag this to the downside and we do also incorporate the first major cluster over here, there's a lot more clusters of support. And you might be wondering, you know, why is there larger clusters down here, but it seems to get smaller over on this cluster? This is simply because we have drawn the fixed volume profile on the right side. This is only incorporating data from the March 2020 crash. However, when we're drawing it from down here, you know, December 2018, we're incorporating the data from the wave 1. And let's say you wanted to be you wanted to have all of the data possible. So let's just draw from all the way back here and look at the major support ranges. Well, when you're looking at the all-time high ranges, the largest amount of volume is actually down here at 10,000. So 10,000 would seem to be the absolute low for Bitcoin. I would also like to emphasize, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think we're going down to 10,000. It is just where the largest amount of volume is traded. That is all I want to say about that. So if we look at something more conservative, look at data points that are associated with the most recent bull run instead of dragging back and incorporating all of these data, what we notice is this is your next level to the downside. So if you do take out this volume cluster over on the VPVR, you are going to massively cascade, and 12,500 is where the bottoming target seems to want to be, which also does line up with a lot of the TA that I've been doing on my channel. Now, I would also like to state, I don't think we're going as low as 12,000. I definitely wouldn't rule it out. I would say I'd associate a 40% probability with a move down to 12,500, but that is my absolute low. I would not think whatsoever that we would be going beneath there. However, I have actually set up price buys at 12k, 11k, 10k, and 9k just in case we have a wick. But once again, just because I've set a buy order down there doesn't mean I think it's going to happen. I just want to be prepared in case that scenario happens, that I'd be able to accumulate cheap Bitcoin. And I've only allocated about 10% of my capital to buy-ins below 12,500, and the beauty of that is, if we do come down to 9,000, I can go full degen and I can ape into Bitcoin at these cheaper prices. And if we never hit that price, let's say we come down to 12,500, we come down to 14,000, which once again, by the way, if you're new to the channel, I have been saying 14,000 is where I really start aping into Bitcoin. I do think the bottom is at 14,000. I'm technically actually going to be aping in between 16,500 and 14,000. However, I have been DCAing to the downside since 25k, and I will continue to do that because I have been holding Bitcoin since 2017, and I do not plan on stopping anytime soon. So with that being said, once again, if you do take out the cluster of support that we've got right over here, so let's say if Bitcoin drops more than, let's just say 9%. If Bitcoin drops 9% and has like daily closes, weekly closes, we could drop another 36% down to 12,500. Over on the volume profile for the visible range, let's move out this support floor. So let's mark this as red for the most bloodiest scenario that I personally see coming into fruition. Once again, I have my bets more over hedged around about the 14k region. You can see there is a cluster of support right over here on the volume profile for the visible range. There's not a lot when we are drawing from the bear market low, but when you are drawing purely based from the pandemic drop to the run up, which is basically saying we're looking at the volume since the pandemic hit, and subsequently we're measuring volume profiles since the US started printing heavily, which makes a lot of sense to me because at this moment in time they're recalling a lot of that money using tight monetary policy. They are increasing the interest rate, and subsequently that money is now bleeding out of the market, but the money started flowing into the market when the pandemic hit and they were using quantitative easing. So I find that it makes sense that we are looking at this VPVR range rather than this one, but I would like to incorporate both. With that being said, there is a decent cluster between this range up here, semi-decent range up at 14,100, and there's a huge cluster all the way down to 12,700. So if I mark this one as green, let me mark the outline as something you can see, so white. Where I personally think we bottom is in this green box down here. What I think is going to be happening in the next month or so, I'm going to tell you exactly what I think is going to happen. In the next 3 weeks, we're going to have the next FOMC meeting, because Jerome Powell's been saying if the inflation keeps on going up, if CPI keeps on going up, then we're going to keep on tightening monetary policy. I think because of that, we're going to get at least, brace yourself for this, 100 basis point increase over on the FOMC meeting. That is going to be absolutely brutal, and I do not think that they can continue doing this. They've dug themselves in such a large hole, and I always have this saying, you can't taper a Ponzi. I said that with Luna, I say it with the US dollar. You can't taper a Ponzi. Once the Ponzi-nomics start to kick in, there's no going back. So yes, they can increase the interest rates in the short to midterm to hope that this subsides the market, but in my opinion, they can only do it for another couple of months. So in my opinion, I am bearish for Q3, and I do believe the Fed is going to start backpedaling in Q4. So within the next 3 weeks, we're going to have the GDP. We're going to be in a recession, in my opinion, confirmed recession, back-to-back negative GDP. We're also going to have the FOMC meeting. They're going to increase the interest rates by 100 basis points, also known as a 1 percentile increase. They could even increase by 125 basis points. I'm going to go for 100, be slightly more conservative. With that being said, in the next 3 weeks, with the FOMC, with the GDP, this is going to allow us enough momentum to break beneath this volume profile beneath 18,000. That's going to sink Bitcoin beneath its previous all-time high. We could probably backtest this low at 17,650. Do something like this. Let me get rid of the circle. So I think we're going to do this, break below the support, bounce back up, back test this previous capitulation region, and then I think we're going to roll all the way down to between the ranges of 14,000 all the way down to 12,700, 12,600, and this is where I think the bottom's going to be. We could potentially see a huge tear to the upside, coming up to some of the resistance of some of our other volume ranges. I mean, we could even come up to 29,000 if quantitative easing is back in play. I subsequently think we'll have a massive run back down to the downside. We'll retest 19,000, massive volume profile over here, which is also Bitcoin's previous all-time high, and then I think we're going to be catapulted into Q4 up to the upside. I think that is where the bear market low is, end of Q3. That is when I think the Fed is going to start to backpedal, and that, once the Fed backpedals, is when I become bullish. So to reiterate, we have a short-term volume profile between the ranges of 19,500 and 18,000. I think we're going to take out the floor on 18,000 very soon. Once we take out 18,000, I believe, I haven't said this price target in this video, but I also do think there is a potential likelihood of a 16,000 bear market low for Bitcoin. I would say that it's getting less and less likely with inflation going through the roof, and if we do get in a confirmed recession in 3 weeks, if the Fed continues to increase the interest rates by like 100 basis points, I just don't think 16,000 will happen anymore. We'll probably come down to 14,000. This is where I think we'll bottom. We'll have a bounce. Quantitative easing will come back in play in Q4. We'll come up to 29,000 to up to our big volume profile over here. We'll come back test this volume profile, back test Bitcoin's previous all-time high, and then that is when the next run will resume. That is what I think is going to be playing. I hope you did enjoy today's video, my friends, and as always, cowboy out. Peace.